Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. So the point of today's lesson and the idea and what I want to make sure that we do today is really go over the Launching the Nation CRQ that I gave you guys yesterday in class. So we've done these before. We know the story with these. We know what we have to do with this. So I just want to make sure that I read through the documents and go over it with you. So hopefully you understand exactly what happened and you understand exactly kind of what some of your options were to talk about and stuff like that, so that you get an understanding, hopefully, of how you're supposed to answer these and stuff like that. We need to make sure that we practice these. We need to make sure we go over these and go through these and do these so that we're used to them. I want, like I said at the beginning of the year, I want these to be automatic so we know right off the bat exactly what we're doing. And when you sit down to do this next year, or when you sit down to do this in ninth grade or 10th grade, it's automatic to you. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and we're going to read through each of these documents. We're going to read through the information that we can, and I'm going to show you a couple places where you can find that information and that would help you answer these questions. So with document one, we can see it is a cartoon. Document one, if you look right up here, guys, right at the top underneath document one, it says the XYZ Affair. So we know right off the bat that this document is going to be about the XYZ Affair. And if you don't remember what the XYZ Affair was, the best thing for you to do is to go ahead and take and go back, look back at the John Adams presidency lesson and pull up the John Adams WebQuest, the John Adams presidency WebQuest. And what that will give you access to, excuse me, guys, what that will give you access to is that'll give you access to that WebQuest and access to the History Channel website. And I want to go ahead and just click on it right now. The History Channel website that talked about the XYZ Affair and the Alien and Sedition Acts. And this gives you kind of a basic breakdown of the XYZ Affair, and it does a pretty good job. It gives you kind of the bare bones of what the XYZ Affair was about. And the XYZ Affair can be seen right here. When John Adams took office, he sent a three-member delegation to Paris to meet with the foreign minister, Charles Talleyrand. Instead, three French representatives referred to in official U.S. documents as X, Y, and Z demanded a $250,000 bribe as well as a loan of $10 million before talks could begin. So that was the XYZ Affair, guys. That's exactly the event we're talking about. The fact that three delegates from the United States, when they went to France to meet with Charles Talleyrand, were asked to pay a $250,000 bribe and a $10 million loan before they could actually speak to Talleyrand. So now that we know the exact event that led to the XYZ Affair, and we know what the XYZ Affair is from our memory, we can at least read the description and take a look at the image. So after the XYZ Affair, French ships continued to attack American ships. In this political cartoon, the United States is represented by the woman right here. The men representing the French are taking valuables from her. The people in the distance are other European nations. So they're basically other European nations are kind of watching the French as they steal the riches from U.S. merchant ships and stuff like that. That is basically the point of this cartoon. That's what this cartoon, the message that this cartoon is trying to get across. So the first question says, explain the historical circumstances that led to the XYZ Affair. So just as a reminder, I know I mentioned it yesterday, but I want to say it one more time just as a reminder. When we see the two-word phrase historical circumstances, it's asking you what are the events that led up to a particular event. So in this question specifically, it says explain the historical circumstances that led to the XYZ Affair. So explain the events that led up to the XYZ Affair. That is what that question is asking you. That is what it's asking you to talk about. So if we go back to the History Channel website, this is a very brief version, a very short version. It is also a correct answer. when it says the two parties, it's talking about the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. And it says the two parties also diverged dramatically over issues of foreign policy. In 1794, the Federalist administration of George Washington signed the Jay Treaty with Britain, greatly improving Anglo or English American relations, but it angered the French, who were then at war with Britain. Okay? So because the United States signed the Jay Treaty with England, this is going to anger the French. So when John Adams sends his 3-member delegation to Paris, that is going to cause the XYZ affair, the Jay Treaty, and the anger with which the French, or not with which, but the anger that the French have over the Jay Treaty and the signing of the Jay Treaty is going to cause them to demand this bribe and this loan. So however you want to word it, however you want to say it, it's completely up to you. But this paragraph right here really lays out in the simplest form what what the historical circumstances were that led to the XYZ affair. So it's the signing of the Jay Treaty with the British that's going to improve American and British relations, the relationship that England and the United States have, and is going to anger the French. That is the simplest way you can talk about it. Now, if you mentioned the Neutrality Proclamation of 1793, where England and France were at war and the United States decided to completely stay out of it, and they still traded with each other, and then you talk about Jay's Treaty, and then you talk about the fact that the French are angry, that is also acceptable. That is also a part of it. But the simplest, most direct answer is to talk about Jay's Treaty and talk about the fact that the French are angry at the United States for making peace with England. That is going to be the main reason why the XYZ affair happens. So that is the answer to number one. The signing of Jay's Treaty and the kind of bettering of relations between the British and the United States is going to anger the French. So that is the best way to answer number one. That is the most direct historical circumstance that led to the XYZ affair. So that would be the answer to number one. If you have something like that, you are all set, you're squared away. What I would suggest is that you take a second, pause the video. If you need to rewind it or anything like that, go ahead and do that so you can double check your answer compared to the answer we just talked about for what led to the XYZ affair, what historical circumstances led to the XYZ affair. Okay, so you went ahead and you paused the video. I wanted to give everybody a second to kind of do that, guys. So now we move on to document 2. Washington's farewell address. So we know that's what the document's going to be. It's going to be about Washington saying farewell after he has decided not to run for a third term as president. So let's go ahead and get into this and read this. So on September 19th, 1796, President George Washington's farewell address first appeared in a Philadelphia newspaper. In it, Washington wrote about the nation's economy, political parties, and foreign policy. So that's a description of Washington's farewell address. The next 2 paragraphs are going to be actual parts of his farewell address. So it says, while then every part of our country feels an immediate and particular interest in the Union, all the parts combined cannot fail to find in the united mass greater strength, greater resource, proportionally greater security from external danger, and a less frequent interruption of their peace by foreign nations. So already you're kind of getting the idea when he says a less frequent interruption of their peace by foreign nations. He's talking about kind of stepping away from foreign nations a little bit. He's talking about kind of coming together as the states, feels an immediate and particular interest in the Union. All the parts combined cannot fail to find in the united mass greater strength, greater resource, proportionally greater security from external danger, a less frequent interruption of their peace by foreign nations. So if these states come together, they will find greater strength among themselves. They'll have the resources that they need, and they will have security from external danger and a less frequent interruption of their peace by foreign nations. So they won't have to worry about foreign nations going to war, pulling the United States in, or having some impact on the United States. So that is kind of starting to give us an idea that Washington has a very negative view of the United States being involved with other nations of the world. So looking at the second paragraph, the great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is to have with them as little political connection as possible. So that really lays it out right there, guys. He basically wants the United States to have, as little connection, as little government connection as possible with foreign nations. He doesn't want the United States to really get entangled in the political and government events of other nations. That's what he's trying to avoid. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. There can be no greater error than to expect or calculate upon real favors from nation to nation. There can be no greater error than to expect or calculate upon real favors from nation to nation. So if you're going to rely on another nation, you're really going to kind of put yourselves at a disadvantage and make it very difficult for yourselves, because you don't know if you can rely on that foreign nation. You don't know if they're going to follow through with what they are telling you they will do. So that's what that line means. And the last line, it is an illusion which experience must cure, which a just pride ought to discard. So he's really, in that paragraph, he really lays out that he does not believe the United States should really be involved with other foreign nations. You can't count on them. They are going to take, we should steer clear of permanent alliances. You can't rely on them. And the belief that you can rely on them is an illusion that that experience needs to cure, needs to kind of have us get rid of or not rely on that. We need to teach ourselves that we cannot have alliances with other nations, and a just pride ought to discard. A pride in ourselves and a reliance in ourselves ought to convince us that we don't need foreign alliances. So that is the gist of this document. That is kind of the message of this document. So in question number 2, it says, based on this excerpt from George Washington, identify his point of view concerning the United States being involved with other nations of the world. It's very clear in this document that he is saying that the United States should really not be involved a whole lot with foreign nations, or politically, the United States should not rely on foreign nations. So he's really trying to make that argument. That is his point of view. That is his opinion. When we say point of view, that's generally what we mean, their opinion on the United States being involved with other nations of the world. He has a very negative opinion of it. He does not want the United States to really be involved with other nations. So I'll give you guys a second or two. You can go ahead and pause the video here and kind of change up your answer, or do what you got to do to take and make sure you kind of check your answer with what we just talked about. All right, guys. So the last question. Now, the last question says, identify and explain a cause and effect relationship associated with the events or ideas in documents 1 and 2. Be sure to use evidence from both documents 1 and 2 in your response. So a cause refers to something that contributes to the occurrence of an event, the rise of an idea, or the bringing about of a development. And the effect refers to what happens as a consequence or a result, impact, or outcome of an event, an idea, or a development. So we know, based on what we've learned, that Washington's farewell address happened before the XYZ affair. So this is going to be the first thing, and Washington's farewell address should really be the first thing that we talk about. So it is very obvious that Washington is giving the United States a suggestion that they should not take and align themselves politically or really try to create alliances with foreign nations, with nations of the world, especially Europe, because Europe has been involved in many wars over the centuries. And that's, in his view, it's kind of what Europe does. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. In his view, it's kind of what Europe does. So Washington is really kind of trying to convey this message. And you can take really any one of these lines from the second paragraph, because it does say, remember that you need to use evidence from both documents 1 and 2 in your response. So the best thing to do would really be to start out and talk about how Washington does not believe. In document 2, we can see that Washington doesn't believe that the United States should be involved in or align itself or kind of create alliances with foreign nations. And it says it right here in document 2. It says, to have with them as little political connection as possible, it is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. You can take that sentence and put it in quotation marks and copy it word for word and say, after you've copied that, this shows that George Washington did not favor alliances with foreign nations, did not favor alliances with other nations, and thought that the United States shouldn't do that. So that would be kind of, in effect, a cause. This was an idea that Washington kind of conveyed. By the time we get to John Adams in 1796, he's going to not take the suggestion of George Washington. What he's going to do instead is he's going to try to improve the relationship that the United States has with France. He thinks that's a good idea. He thinks that's the way the United States should go. And as a result of Adams trying to do that, we have the event known as the XYZ Affair. And it is illustrated in the political cartoon of document 1, where we know that during the XYZ Affair, the French tried to force the United States to pay a bribe and give the French a $10 million loan. All right, guys, hang on one second. That popped up. Okay, let me just close these out. Some of you handed some stuff in. That's perfect. So we know that the French tried to force the United States to bribe the French and give them a $10 million loan. And we also know that they began to attack American ships. The French continued to attack American ships even after the XYZ Affair. So what you would argue in the cause is that really that John Adams did not listen to the advice of George Washington. And as a result of that, you have events like the XYZ Affair. So Washington, we talked in the first part of this question about document 2, how Washington tried to give the United States advice and future presidents advice. And the next president, John Adams, did not listen to that advice and tried to actually improve relations with the United States, or with France, tried to improve the relationship the United States had with France. And as a result of that, we can see not only that the XYZ Affair happened, as it's mentioned in document 1, but French ships also continued to attack American ships after the XYZ Affair, causing an artist to kind of create this political cartoon to show that the French were taking advantage of the United States, and everything that kind of Washington said would happen did happen. So the way to kind of tie this in, guys, is to basically mention that Washington did not want the United States to be involved with foreign nations. The United States got involved anyway under John Adams. And as a result of that, you had the XYZ affair. So I kind of went through in a lot of detail what you should talk about and what you should mention from documents 1 and documents 1 and 2. And then I just gave you a very simple kind of 1 to 2 sentence explanation of how you should take what the cause and what the effect are. But you need to make sure that you listen to the more detailed explanation so that you understand what you should pull from document 2 and what you should pull from document 1 and what you should say about document 1 to show that you're pulling evidence, as it says in question number 3, to show that you're using evidence from both documents 1 and 2 in your response. If this seems confusing, guys, please email me. Please ask me during my office hours, and I will get back to you as quickly as I can. This is kind of a breakdown of what the CRQ should look like. I can't take and really collect it from all of you, and I don't want to collect it from some of you and not from everybody. And I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to really kind of get that feedback as to what they were supposed to do and really kind of check it themselves. So this was kind of the best way that I saw to make sure that I got the answers across to you and got some feedback across to you guys about how you should really answer this and what the answers are to the CRQ. Again, guys, if you have any questions, please email me. Please let me know. If you are confused about how to answer a CRQ or how to do a CRQ, please email me. Please let me know, and I will walk you through it as best I can. Or if and when we get back to school, you can always stay after school with me, guys, and I will walk you through it. If you don't have it, that's pretty much everything I wanted to make sure that I mentioned today, guys, and make sure I talked about today. This is all I wanted to do, was just go over this CRQ. So you do not have any homework tonight, guys. This was all I wanted you to do. So just make sure you watch this video. Make sure you go through and you kind of write down what I said and kind of make sure you go through and you understand how to answer this. That's why I made this video. That's the point of this. If you need to pause it, if you need at any point, if you need to rewind it, if you need to watch it more than once, do that, because this is probably one of the most important skills that you are going to be expected to do the rest of your school career. And I really, really, really want to make sure that you guys know how to do these. And when you take and leave my classroom and you go on to your next social studies teacher and they give you one of these, I want it to be automatic. So you're not afraid to do it. You're not scared to do it. You're not sitting there saying, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. My goal is so that it is for this to be automatic. So watch this as much as you need to. Go over it as much as you need to. And make sure you get this in your head up here, guys, so that this is automatic for you. That's all I had for this lesson today, guys. If you have any questions, make sure you email me. Make sure you reach out to me. All right, guys, have a fantastic day. I will catch you tomorrow.